storytelling is universal. It's something that is innately human. If you think back to the beginning of history, humans were gathering together around a fire telling tales, telling stories. And that is in some ways what makes us human. And that is what Dungeons & Dragons provides this wonderful framework for now, is that everyone can get together and enjoy their time telling stories.
Hello and welcome to Character Count by @TwitterBusiness. I'm your host, @Joe Wadlington. We show you the creative ways that standout brands and businesses and people use Twitter to connect and engage with the audiences that matter most to them. Gaming Twitter is huge and extremely creative and active. We are so excited to finally have someone from a gaming company on Character Count.
I am Greg Tito. I am the Senior Communications Manager for Dungeons & Dragons at Wizards of the Coast.
Now, you've probably heard the name Dungeons & Dragons before, and maybe Magic the Gathering as well, but it's probably not tied to the community that you're expecting.
We found that Twitter is a wonderful way to engage with the Dungeons & Dragons community. And I use it personally to find people who are doing really creative things and elevate them so that they have their voice get heard.
Greg Tito is going to tell us all about how he is updating this legacy brand and the extremely creative ways that he is using Twitter to engage their community. Later in the show, we'll have Bianca Posterly, a senior social strategist at Twitter, who's going to keep that community engagement thread going. And then I'll be asking you for your hot takes on this episode's topic. But that's later. Greg is right now. My cab driver from the airport, it turns out, was actually a night guard here.
Oh, cool.
Years ago. And for his first shift, he had not had the time to do a building walkthrough before. So he did his first shift not knowing that there are statues of orcs and elves around the building and different monster heads. And can you imagine patrolling the office, having no idea that there were more battle axes than a normal night guard would expect?
I often forget how odd it is where I work, where I have, I bring in guests or something like that, and they'll be like, "Whoa, that's so, I wish I had that type of thing," right? And so I totally feel bad for that poor security guard who had to walk around a corner and have a 8-foot tall, giant leering down upon him.
Describe Dungeons & Dragons Twitter in 3 words.
Inclusive, community building, that's dash, so that's one word. And silly. I like that there is a voice to the Dungeons & Dragons Twitter handle that, if there's a glitch or something went wrong, we'll blame the gnomes for messing up the knobs and tubes back at their, workshop or something like that. There is an element of not taking the brand too seriously that I really think Twitter is able to get across in just a few very flavorful words.
And that's a deft extension of what your customers do and what your players do, where they're so silly, they're so inventive, they are subverting every part about the game constantly, and that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
And so then if you had a very press release type voice, it would not really be a match.
Exactly, right. I mean, I think so much of what makes Dungeons & Dragons entertaining is that improv comedic nature, even though
the irreverence.
Yeah, exactly. And so being able to have that voice come through when we're talking about the new games that are coming out, I think fans realize that it's not just, like as you said, a press release or just marketing copy. It's someone who understands them and they might be those type of people in their day jobs, and so they can identify with the brand even more.
So tell me about some of the creative ways that you're using Twitter.
There's a bunch of fun ways that we have experimented with using Twitter through automation that I've loved and I want to do more of going forward. One of the coolest examples was we were publishing a book called Curse of Strahd, which is a vampire book. It's a gothic horror, and one of the elements within it was a Vistani, which is an analog for kind of a fortune teller type of community. At the beginning of this adventure, draws from a deck of cards that's called the Taroka deck, similar to a tarot deck, but very much themed for this. And then what you drew out of that deck informed where the locations would be in the adventure. So it was kind of a randomization element that was within it. We worked with a group called Field Train to automate the character of Madame Ava, who was the fortune teller. And if a consumer on Twitter retweeted a specific tweet which we told them, and if you retweet this, you'll get a random draw from the Taroka deck with a fortune. And it's going to be a uniquely generated fortune for you. And we worked with this group to almost create like a Mad Libs system where there was only 52 cards in the deck. If a card was drawn, the AI would choose different phrases that would essentially create a unique fortune that would be themed for that card. And it was an immediate way for the Twitter users to interact with what made this adventure cool and interesting, to the point where people were just retweeting this over and over again so they got a different pull.
To get different fortunes.
Yeah, exactly. And then all of a sudden, I didn't realize it would have a collectible aspect to it, but people were doing it multiple so they could see all 52 of the cards and see how they would interact with each other and how they could potentially do it. And we did this when the book was announced, before it had actually come out. So it generated this huge amount of buzz, had tons of engagement from people who were just retweeting our messages over and over again. And I really liked that we made retweeting the activation for turning on this feature because it just spread the word even farther and allowed it to organically grow out there too. I really loved that. And I tried to build on that for another release that was coming out where, we were talking about different characters that you can create and come up with. And we created essentially a random character generator on Twitter for cool. Our Storm King's Thunder release. And again, you worked with the same group, Field Train, to identify the different races. There's like halflings, elves, dwarves, and we kind of like set up. I think it was like 240 different iterations that could occur. And again, use the Mad Libs type thing. So it could be like, halfling, and we gave them a name, and then a very small biographical detail about them, like slew a giant on the crossroads on the way to Baldur's Gate or something like that. And we used one of our concept artists to create 240 portraits of a character, and then they would use those as a male-facing halfling or a female tiefling. Here's what it looks like. Here's a little bit of biographical detail, and again, people use this just for fun because you got to see what were all the different iterations that this generator could come up with. But also,
it's so practical because you're in your circle, you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, and then the narrative takes a turn. You're like, oh shit, we just need another character. You can pull out your phone. Do the thing on Twitter, and then you just have one with a picture of them right there.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a great way to I think use the blend of community automation and Twitter's general community building stuff to really come up with something really neat. So
it's incredible.
I loved it, and I want to do more stuff like that.
So you are incredible at finding people through Twitter. Dungeons & Dragons does a lot of streaming. You find power players. You bring people onto your podcast. What advice would you give other brands for generating that, for attracting that user-generated content and for finding their super fans through Twitter?
I would say follow the community. Some brands are very good out there about, giving follows back to fans. And I've noticed some are not. Some you might see a brand account that's got 0 people that they're following. And I'm like, oh, geez. I mean, how are you finding? Obviously, I use my personal Twitter as well to discover some of these people. But so I curated my feed to be like, hey, here's a voice from a community that I haven't heard a lot from that's talking about Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to follow that person and see who they're interacting with. And I'm just listening. I'm not even participating yet, right? Until I'm like, all right, well, here's a perfect opportunity to bring this in because I have this podcast topic that I want to talk about, or I want to elevate these people and find influencers that might be able to speak more to my brand. But I probably listened to them for 6 months to a year before that, I really, found the right opportunity to kind of to have them be in there. So I'd say listen, and it's a good skill for a podcaster. It's a really good skill for using Twitter too.
What advice would you give a brand that's still trying to find their voice on Twitter?
Sometimes on Twitter and in online interactions, showing some faults is okay and might actually be more endearing to your customers. And so that's why when I mentioned the silliness of our thing, things happen and get messed up all the time. And if we ignored that and tried to pretend that there were no faults, I think that would come across as false and just marketing, right? And
absolutely.
So by showing sometimes the how the sausage is made or the I don't want to say seedy underbelly, but at least some of the underbelly that I think that it can be
well,
very
the
endearing.
human side of it, right?
Yeah.
Marketing is at a level of maturity where I think we've all gotten a little over the glossiness, and there's some brands that can still do it, and it's really attractive and wonderful, but it's very few of them.
Mm-hmm.
And what is much more interesting is the authenticity and the human side, and also working in marketing for so long. It's more fun for your coworkers, your colleagues, like to be able to be yourselves at work, and then your customers respond to that humanity and focusing more on commonality as opposed to the veneer and trying to get that going. I think it makes so much sense that people on Twitter absolutely love it. We see them respond to more conversational-based messages much better, and then I think it's just more fun to produce.
Yeah, I think there's a really good point to that. You don't want to be in a cookie cutter situation where if you feel like that the cookie that you made is imperfect, it's not going to taste good. But you know what? It will taste good. And in some ways, if it's a beautiful flaw, it might taste even better.
Yeah. And either way, it's still a cookie, right?
Exactly.
Tell me about the makeup of your team.
So the Dungeons & Dragons team is half devoted towards creating the books and the materials for the game, and then a marketing group that has shifted and changed a bunch. But right now, I work very closely with a community manager named Raphael Rowdry and Lisa Penrose, who is our social media manager. And she does the lion's share of the posting, but we all kind of contribute to like, oh, this would be a great idea, or this is something that we really want to get across, or this is a funny joke that I think might translate to that type of thing. Luckily, I have to do less and less of that because she is excellent at being she was already a member of the community before we brought her on, and so she just kind of got the voice and was able to bring some of her voice as well. So that has been a really great way to do it. But it's all integrated with the marketing initiatives that Dungeons & Dragons is doing in general. So a lot of those team members also work on the events. I mentioned D&D Live. We're working on one again for next year, and their input as being social media and community managers have a big part of that because they work with the same influencers that we use on Twitter will be at this live event, and it's all part of the same kind of ecosystem. So we really do think of them as a integrated part of the team.
Clearly, Greg has some expert community managers on his team, which made me want to bring back our expert community manager from the mini episode that you heard previously, Bianca Posterly, Senior Social Strategist at Twitter. Where do you think the social team should sit in an organization?
I think that it's interesting because it's such a cross-function of marketing and comms, especially for a lot of social brands that really are like the first line of defense for your company in a comms point of view. So I think that as long as they have direct access to both the marketing and comms leads, then it's perfectly fine. But it's by far a marketing and communication function.
Is there anyone else the social team needs to have access to?
Definitely the CMO and heads of comms, but then anyone that really is speaking out on behalf of the brand, whether that's the head of product, if you're a tech company, or anyone that's running events, you want to make sure that the social voice is the exact same as the one that's speaking about product or hosting events or bringing people in for reviews. You have to make sure it's cohesive.
If a community manager is starting at a brand, where should they start to figure out the old voice, to get the stats, to start tweeting effectively?
I would say take a deep dive into every single thing that you can. So obviously a really great place to start is any of the analytics. But I think that a lot of people don't pay enough attention to the replies to tweets. So looking at brands' replies that they've done to their audience, I think is super, super important. In both if you haven't or if you should or if you have been doing it and maybe they are not, up to par. Twitter's all about conversation, so that's a huge portion of it. And then I would say any sort of like existing tone of voice documents, look at those, really dive into the voice and knowing where it's been and then focusing on where you can go.
So it sounds like when a social coordinator or a community manager starts at a company, the best way to set them up for success is give them a lot of time to research at the very beginning. What other ways would you suggest to set a social employee up for success?
That's totally accurate. They really need time to dive in, research, read, get up to speed on what the company has done in the past, where the handle's gone in the past. But I would also say that one really important thing is making sure they have time to set up their TweetDeck filters. So it's definitely difficult to just...
And you use TweetDeck?
I do, yes. I love TweetDeck. It's awesome.
Are you ever not on TweetDeck?
Ooh. I do love the native Twitter app as well. TweetDeck, I think, is fantastic just because you can sort of set it and forget it. You set all your filters, then you don't have to think about searching for them anymore. So I love that. My computer doesn't love TweetDeck. I just got a new computer because TweetDeck definitely is a high-powering function as opposed to one that's easy on your computer. But I think it's amazing. And I think that the filter ability is one that people don't necessarily take the most advantage of. The strongest community managers will be able to set like really strong filters.
And that's why you need to give them time to do that.
Exactly. So I think that in between looking at the replies and the mentions to a handle, they'll then be able to set appropriate filters for their TweetDeck and then know how to drive tweets to the strategist for review and bubble up bigger ideas that are happening on platform.
What is the least helpful guidance to give a community manager?
I know this is a hard question, I think, because the obvious answer is just like make this go viral.
Every social coordinator that's listening just cringed because we've all had that boss that's like, hey, make this go viral. And then you're like, no, that won't go viral. And then they show you, they talk about like, oh no, I saw this tweet over the weekend and it went viral and it's tweeted by like some teen. And you're like, those are teens. They're too powerful. We can't. Like
the teenagers, they know everything. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's definitely very difficult to hear just make this go viral because it undermines what we do on a regular basis. It also undermines the understanding of leadership when saying like, let's just make this go viral. But I think that one of the least helpful things you can say to a community manager is, can you just like write this copy really quickly? That's really underestimating the power of words and the power of what they do and understanding the community and also understanding how to put together like the perfect reply or the perfect tweet.
Bianca, thank you so much for coming on To Character Count again. And now, back to Greg. Dungeons & Dragons is not the only brand that is inside of Wizards of the Coast. There are tons of popular ones, including Magic the Gathering.
That's right. Yes. And Magic just celebrated its 25th anniversary. It is a card game that is collectible.
So my experience with Magic the Gathering is it's just such an in-person game.
Yeah.
So then how does it come online and what is Magic the Gathering Arena?
Magic the Gathering Arena is the perfect online iteration of the full card game. Magic the Gathering Arena is this wonderful way to express yourself, at your computer screen right now, and I really love it. I play almost every night where I'll just go and I'll play a few matches, and it's has that kind of face-to-face nature because you are playing against a human component, and it gets matched up very quickly. They can do, if people are viewing Twitter on their PC, you can have a direct link. All of a sudden, they're downloading the game. They're in, hopefully, within minutes.
That's interesting because you would think with Magic the Gathering, something that was so nice about the more traditional play is it's a deck of cards. It's paper, and so you can do that anywhere. It's very portable. But more people do have an internet connection than they do have access to a game store. So bringing Magic the Gathering online would widen the access.
For sure. And it has democratized the game a lot more so that people who might have only been able to splurge on the $4 pack of cards at a game store, it's free to play. Magic the Gathering Arena is completely free, and you can earn cards just by playing through the game. Obviously you can buy into it and you'll get more cards, but I haven't done that yet. I've only really just played it for free and really just had a wonderful time enjoying it that way. And I think that's a great way to combine a few different things that have been going on in the gaming culture right now as far as monetizing free-to-play stuff. And that makes engagement and user acquisition super important. And Twitter has been fantastic for the Arena team in converting players who may have played the paper game, might have had an experience like you did at a summer camp where, that nostalgia feel. Those are the type of players that are a prime target for Arena because you're like, you remember what this was? You remember how great it used to feel?
So how do you target those people and convert them?
So the Arena team is fantastic and they have done a wonderful job, and I can only speak to it a little bit, but the way they do it is identify fans or potential fans using the Twitter ad tools and using keywords for, strategy players or gamers who might enjoy some of the other collectible card games that are out there now, and try to target those fans with the type of ad that would appeal to them the most, right? It's been a really great boon for them to be able to use all those tools and find that's like, so then when they're investing in ads, it ends up converting at a much higher rate than it would be if there was just a shotgun approach.
And I noticed that y'all are running ads in several different languages. I saw some in German and French and Japanese. Are you targeting an international audience?
Absolutely. So Magic the Gathering has been translated into many different languages throughout the world. And that's a challenging thing to be able to communicate with a global community simultaneously with the native North American languages that are out there. And they've risen to the challenge and done it very well. And rather than only advertise to specific markets, they have decided to do that all simultaneously so that each ad that gets created, if they think it's one that would translate, not just in words, but in culture to all of those markets, they would then translate it and make sure that it makes sense for each of the languages that Magic the Gathering appears in. But what I also really like is what they will sometimes create specific ads that would work well for those markets specifically. It adds another layer of thinking about which ads would work well for which markets, but I think it is shown to have great results and not just being English first or American first or anything like that. They're able to show that this is a global community and then elevate those people as well.
And now we want to hear from you. We need your hot takes about community managing. So this episode's topic is, what is your greatest community managing fear? What keeps you up at night? What are you always concerned that you're going to do right in front of your boss? The question is live right now at Twitter Business. Please tweet at us your hot takes and we'll engage right back. What does Magic the Gathering use Twitter ads for?
It is one of the primary acquisition tools for Arena. It is a way to get people who may have lapsed or might be interested in a competing CCG out there might want to give it a try. It is a little bit different than other platforms out there because it can feel so immediate and show immediate results. And so they have invested heavily to make sure that the right eyeballs are seeing the asset and trying to convert them as quickly as possible into downloads. Streaming and influencer groups is a way to normalize and make the Magic play feel natural. But I think using Twitter ads in order to target those audiences that might skew a little bit younger than the paper game is a great way that they're looking to expand. And sorry to bring it back to Dungeons & Dragons, but all of the lessons that the Arena team has learned for ads through Magic the Gathering, we are applying now to Dungeons & Dragons.
A problem that a lot of companies do is they silo themselves out. And maybe if they have a few separate brands, a few different handles, teams can either get defensive about what they've learned or budget may not be spread as evenly out. And for other reasons, they will not apply learnings and each one has to start completely from scratch every time. And even if your subsidiaries are very different, little parts of your company are very different, it's probably not more different than starting from scratch. So there's probably some type of learning that you can apply, save yourself some time and some money.
Absolutely. I think that is a tenet of Wizards of the Coast in general, is to apply lessons as well as you can between gaming brands, because you're right, they're not so disparate that what we learn on one is going to be inapplicable. I mean, they are different brands. They are, they all deserve their own teams and their different expressions, but there is a lot that can be shared, and I think we're going to be doing that more and more going forward.
Clearly, Greg has some incredible things to say about Twitter, about Dungeons & Dragons, about elves, but I wanted to see if he could truly make his characters count. So I asked him some rapid fire questions and he had to answer in 280 characters or less. If you could have a fantastic beast as a pet, what would it be?
I would love to have a blink dog as a pet. I mean, they're dogs. It kind of fits the whole pet theme. I'm more of a cat person personally, but I really love the idea that blink dogs are these chaotic, good creatures that can teleport, blink with a blink of their eyes and go 30 feet away. And, they can either do that to get to the food much quicker or to get away from me if they're stinking up the place.
Orcs or elves?
Elves. Definitely elves.
Dark magic or white magic?
White magic.
What movie have you seen more times than any other movie?
Ferris Buellers Day Off.
What did you want to be when you were a little kid?
I wanted to be a writer from a very early age, and I kind of am one, so it's okay.
How do you? So it's okay.
So it's okay.
I think you're saying that to little Greg. I don't think that's to me. What is your normal day breakfast?
Coffee.
What is your breakfast before you record Dragon Talk?
A bacon, egg, and cheese on a whole wheat English muffin I get from the cafe downstairs.
What is your favorite time of day?
My favorite time of day is 11:35 p.m. when I'm in the midst of playing Magic Arena and hopefully having just defeated my opponent.
Sounds like I know the answer to this, but what is your happy place?
My happy place is Candlekeep. It's a library in the Forgotten Realms that is the repository for all knowledge, and you can only get into Candlekeep if you give a book that they do not yet have.
How do you take your coffee?
Cream and lots of sugar.
If you owned a restaurant, what would the special be?
The special would be ramen noodles.
What background music do you listen to while you work?
I usually put on something that's upbeat. Recently, I've been listening to a band called Too Many Zoos to do my writing to.
What is your favorite Twitter tip?
My favorite Twitter tip is one that I've used personally a lot, which is if you are unsure about posting something potentially controversial, to write it and then delete it and then think about it.
What is your favorite life tip?
My favorite life tip is to create work on a deadline.
Really think about those controversial tweets and create work on a deadline. Greg Tito, thank you so much for joining us to Character Count. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to have you on Dragon Talk.
I get to be on Dragon Talk?
Absolutely. You're a D&D fan. Why not?
I would love to be on Dragon Talk.
Let's do it.
You can find us at business.twitter.com/character count. Character Count is a production of Pod People for @TwitterBusiness. This episode was hosted by me, Joe Wadlington. Our executive producer is Rachel King. This episode was produced by Eliza Lambert. It was also produced and edited by Christopher Mawson. Music by Annalise Nelson and Dax Schaefer. Special thanks to Marissa Window and Lindsay Bruce and the entire Twitter customer success team. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever fine podcasts are downloaded, and rate us, ideally 5 stars, but I'm not going to be pushy about it. This episode's topic is now live at Twitter Business. Go! Tweet us your hot takes and follow us at Twitter Business for incredible tips on Twitter ads marketing and best practices, or follow me at Joe Wadlington to see if they actually let me on Dragon Talk or not. Have a great day.